Good evening. Welcome to Edgewise. I'm John Hockenberry. Now, I don't want you to be put off by poetry tonight. I think tonight's show is going to put a little dancing into your weekend. We've got some politics tonight in a world premiere video. Also, teens on smoking. Who asked them? We did. And of course, poetry. The words and images of writer, filmmaker Reggie Gaines. He'll be with us later to share his thoughts on a rising tide of provocative African-American poets. But we start tonight with a voice from the past and the present, Allen Ginsberg. In 1955, he wrote what became one of the most widely read poems of the century, Howl.
I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness, starving, hysterical, naked, dragging themselves through the Negro streets at dawn looking for an angry fix. Angel-headed hipsters burning for the ancient heavenly connection to the starry dynamo and the machinery of night.
The words of Howl and Allen Ginsberg's voice and spirit personified the beat movement of the 50s and 60s, a movement that also included Jack Kerouac, William Burroughs, and many other writers, poets, and musicians.
Including Gregory Corso.
That's right, absolutely. Allen Ginsberg's work has just been released in a brand new collection, a volume on HarperCollins, and it's definitely a pleasure to welcome here to Edgeways. Selected poems, exactly.
Covering about 50
From 1947
years.
to 1995.
Right.
And in this election year, there's also a CD that is out, which we will see a selection from a little later. But in this election year, I wanted to reference one thing, because there are so many political references throughout your work, in this collection and others, from death to Van Gogh's ear.
Right.
All right. Poet is priest, money has reckoned the soul of America. The president built a war machine which will vomit and rear up Russia out of Kansas. The American century betrayed by a mad Senate which no longer sleeps with its wife.
Yep.
There are also references in here to Chiapas in Mexico. Hollywood will rot on the windmills of eternity. Hollywood, whose movies stick in the throat of God.
And
it could have been written.
J. Edgar Hoover.
That's right. This could have been written
Today,
but 1955.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Actually, no, poet. That's probably 56, 57.
Well,
That's
that's
written in
Eisenhower's
Paris,
day.
looking at America from Paris. You know, as an expatriate for half a year or a year, looking back at what I was seeing in, say, out of the Paris Tribune.
What did you think politically about Eisenhower, about Adlai Stevenson, about those campaigns and conventions back then? Did you and Kerouac and Corso and Burroughs talk about such things?
Oh, yeah, quite a bit. Truman, even. Way back to Truman. Well, I remember sitting around listening to Truman's inaugural speech, just way back.
Oh, yeah.
The 40s, was that? and Burroughs' wife sniffing and saying, sounds like a haberdasher. This majest. Eisenhower, actually, I had a problem with him because at that time I was aware of the fact that the CIA was overthrowing the Arbenz government in Guatemala. And I had a friend, Kenneth Love, who worked for the Times, and I heard stories from him about how the CIA had overthrown Mossadegh in
Iran.
Elected premier of Iran, who was sort of neutral in the Cold War, and wanted to nationalize the oil, which the Shah finally did, and how he was overthrown by the CIA, and the Shah put in, and the Shah with his SAVAK, a very dreadful secret police, precipitated this right-wing fundamentalist Ayatollah thing. So the seed of all this Middle Eastern trouble comes from the troubles started by the CIA inadvertently doing stupid things. Seed of all the problems in Central America is the same. And many of the seeds of, later on I began noticing that many of the seeds of problems on the streets with drugs were CIA involvement with heroin.
The story out in Los Angeles.
No, but way back in the 70s, CIA involvement with drug dealing in Indochina, heroin. There's books on it that I worked on, Alfred McCoy's Politics of Heroin in Indochina. But about the presidents, so the real problem with Eisenhower was that he allowed his postmaster general, Summerfield, to seize all mail from the Iron Curtain and cut off communication. And also to prevent D.H. Lawrence's Lady Chatterley's Lover from being sold in America or imported. And I remember reading in Time magazine, he put this great classic by D.H. Lawrence on Eisenhower's desk. And Eisenhower's asking for permission to censor it, stop it in the mail or something. And Eisenhower said, terrible, we can't have that. About this literary classic. So otherwise, Eisenhower was not so bad by hindsight with his opposition to the military-industrial complex.
Sure, well, that very prescient words,
yeah.
Absolutely. A warning that came absolutely true.
Yeah.
Flash forward to 1968, there was much talk of the convention in Chicago this year. You were at the convention in 68.
Yeah, mainly there originally it was the idea to have a festival of life as distinct from a sort of death war festival with a convention still backing the war. I think everybody knew the war was unwinnable by that point. In fact, the Gallup poll in February 68, before the convention, said that 52% of the American people thought the war was always a mistake.
You bitterly said after that convention that the left, the dead the people who died in the war after 68 were as much on the hands of the left as the right in the United States. The left, in some sense, handed the election
it was that
to Nixon.
Much, but what happened was that by disgracing the Democrats, and Humphrey particularly, who secretly was against the war and was actually trying to bring the Viet Cong to the peace table with Thieu, with our man there, with our puppet there, did have some effort to stop the war. I think that was pretty clear to anybody who was prescient at all, but he couldn't say it publicly. So the left got mad at him like their father figure, and disappointed, and so about 2 million people or more in the left didn't vote. A lot of people didn't vote.
It was a $500,000 margin.
Yes,
in 68.
half a million people margin. So Nixon squeaked in because the left dropped out, just like the communists dropped out under Hitler, and either voted for Hitler to show how bad things could be from the right wing, or just indifference. So the war was prolonged. Worse, even though the American public didn't like it, the war was prolonged until when, 74, 75?
Yeah, till 74.
Yeah, so...
Until 70, well, Saigon fell in 75, Nixon was out by 74,
yeah.
But certainly
on the other hand, the alternative view on that is, according to Daniel Ellsberg, who was working for Kissinger in the war machine at that time, Nixon's secret plan for ending the war was to nuke North Vietnam. And the only reason that was not done was because of the protesting in the streets by the left, or by the well, not the left, the anti-war movement.
The protesting changed things.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So they were afraid to do it, thinking it would split the country apart. So the war protest, not the left, but that was the majority of people finally.
Absolutely.
The war protests on the extremist angle didn't help that moment in 68 in the election. On the other hand, in the long run, it may have prevented the use of the nuclear bomb, so 50-50.
Right.
I would say the real responsibility to John Wayne and, the warmongers.
Well, bringing on Rambo, many themes come out of that.
The Catholic Church, the right-wing military, the senators who were wanting to bomb China.
Your political commentary continues to this day. When we come back, we'll have the short premiere of a new short film by Allen Ginsberg and director Gus Van Sant.
Yeah.
When Edgewise returns.
Good man.
MSNBC.